Buenos días de nuevo. Vamos a retomar las comunicaciones tras la pausa y tenemos el placer de presentar a Carle Bonafous Murat, que es el Senior Liaison Officer of the French Rectors Conference and Head of CPU's Brussels Office. Él nos va a hablar con una intervención titulada Inclusion, Participation and Retention, Ways of Succeeding in Higher Education. Tenemos el placer de recibir a Carle de manera online. Así que cuando quiera, Carle.
Thank you to all the participants and thank you to UNITA for inviting me. I must say that I'm particularly pleased to have been invited by UNITA, which I begin to know quite well, but it's one of the European universities with which I'm most familiar these days. If you don't mind, I have slightly modified the title of this talk because when I began to think of it very seriously, I thought that this issue of inclusion, this issue of social participation, this issue of equality needed to be dealt with from a slightly different perspective. And I thought that the issue of equality within mobility and through the prism of mobility would be perhaps more appropriate for the theme of your one-day conference. So if that's not a problem, I have finally chosen as a title social inclusion and the bottlenecks of mobility, the bottlenecks, that is, the problems raised by mobility from a social angle. And I would like to point out as a starting, how long do I have, Mr. Salinas? Is that 20 minutes, 30 minutes? So it's up to me.
No, the whole participation is around 1 hour, so you have 20, 30, or even 40 if you want, and we will make a debate after.
That's right. The Bologna Process and the work carried out by the Bologna follow-up group has consistently centered on the social dimension of higher education, and many communiques produced at the end of the ministerial conferences have stressed the societal aspiration that students completing higher education studies should correspond to the distribution of categories within society. That is, that the student population should reflect the distribution of society at large. And therefore, the Paris Communiqué of 2018 stressed in particular the necessity of involving underrepresented categories and vulnerable groups within higher education policies. I would like to stress that mobility and student mobility should be taken and should be considered as an item which is of specific importance as regards social inclusion, and that many studies have reaffirmed that the problems raised by mobility are problems pertaining to questions of social inclusion and economic equality, and therefore this is going to be the main line of my speech. That is, how can we relate social inclusion and student mobility and what are the problems which this particular connection, what are the problems raised by this particular connection. And that's why I have entitled this speech, Social Inclusion and the Bottlenecks of Mobility. And I have chosen to concentrate on two bottlenecks, two problems, what I have called the outgoing bottleneck of mobility and the incoming bottleneck of mobility. That is, what are the problems that leaving one's university or one's country raise, and what are the problems posed by inclusion in your host institution or your host country. So what about the outgoing bottleneck? Just a few figures as a starting point, figures which are somewhat contradictory. First of all, I'd like to stress something which is obvious, that Erasmus is probably the greatest success story of the European Commission, and that today it is usually considered that about 10 million students have benefited from the Erasmus program since its launch in 1987, which is a very important figure. But on the other hand, this figure only corresponds to only represents 0.7% of the whole population. 10 million versus 1.7%. This throws a different light on the program, and it has been pointed out that most of the difficulties which students face in order to choose to go abroad, most of the reasons behind low participation are related to the economic capacity of the majority of students. That is, their inability to have the proper means of traveling abroad. This is primarily a problem of financial resources, and it is a problem that has been addressed in various ways, but which still requires careful consideration. Satisfactory for most universities, and would seem to allow to provide an effective answer to the existing demand of the academic community, but yet a significant number of students do not choose to go abroad because they do not have the financial support needed to complement the grant awarded by the program. So this issue is really one of inclusion and one also of diversity, because the students who generally are unable to find the complementary means in order to support themselves and go abroad, those students are usually underrepresented in the prevailing categories of students who go abroad. The figure I got, and which is quite telling, I believe, is that 58% of non-mobile students identified uncertainty about the costs as the most important reason for not going abroad. 58% identified cost problems as the primary reason for not going abroad. So I would like to mention the fact that an Erasmus Plus project has just been launched, of which CPU, the French Rectors Conference, is part. This project will try and find means of calculating a new, more inclusive grant in order for students to travel abroad? What are the new determinants of grant calculation needed in order to have a more inclusive approach to the problem of student mobility? This is a project which is led by the University of Porto, and which involves several universities and several actors which are key stakeholders in higher education today, and all of those institutions are also members of European universities, and therefore they have a vested interest in trying to work out new solutions for student mobility. So this issue of economic the economic costs of mobility is center stage and should be addressed in the first place through new means of calculating grants and the complementary resources in order to for students to support themselves when they go abroad. So this is what I would call the outgoing bottleneck, the bottleneck on the way out, if I may rephrase the problem like this. Now, I would like to move on to the incoming bottleneck, which I have identified and which I would like to discuss with you, and a bottleneck which may be of particular interest to UNITA as a European universities, because it relates to the issue of the regional impact of student mobility and a more focused approach to student mobility. I mean, an approach is distinct from the national one, which usually prevails. So this incoming bottleneck deals mainly with the possibility for students who go abroad to find employment in the area where the host institution is located and in the region where the host institution is located. This implies that student mobility may be linked to labor mobility. The implication between student mobility and labor mobility is one that I believe should be addressed very seriously. That is, when students go abroad and especially find a place in a host institution where they stay for 1 year or even for more, this may lead on to the possibility of staying and working in the place where they've been able to find a program which is suited to their needs. And this issue should be posed and raised at the regional level, in particular, as the attraction and retention of students can increase the pool of highly skilled human capital that is available for the workforce and can play an influential role in regional development and growth. This is a quotation taken from a report published by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in 2017. The attraction and retention of students can increase the pool of highly skilled human capital that is available for the workforce and can play an influential role in regional development and growth. So student mobility and the benefits of student mobility show that studying abroad helps a student to cope more successfully with the increasing international dimensions at work in labor mobility and with career enhancement and career development, so that the number of months spent studying abroad increases the probability of working abroad in later life. It has been demonstrated that the more months you spend abroad, the more likely you are to be able to work in the host region afterwards. This is an equivalence that has been studied in some of Erasmus impact studies, in particular studies analyzing the effects of student mobility on individual skills, employability, and institutional development. The longer the stay, the better the possibility of finding oneself in a position to have a job and to find employment abroad. And this is probably also one of the aims that European universities should try and reach. And in order to end this perspective, to end this analysis, I'd like to make one or two comparisons between the system which I know best, which is the French system, and a few systems taken from the English-speaking world. I'd like to establish one or two comparisons with countries which belong to the English-speaking world, but I'm not referring here to either the United States or the UK or Australia. I'd like to establish comparisons with two countries which are less often referred to, but which have interesting legislations in terms of student retention and in terms of student acceptance in the long term. Those two countries which I like to mention are those of New Zealand and Ireland. I've tried to establish comparisons with the possibilities of working in such countries after getting a degrees for international students, and the same possibility in France. And my findings show that in countries such as New Zealand and Ireland, there is a kind of equivalence between the number of months spent studying for a degree and the number of months that a student can stay on in the same country in order to either find a job, create a firm, in other words, in order to find a stable situation in the workforce of that country. If you spend 24 months for a master's degree or 3 years for a doctoral degree, you'll be allowed to have 24 months or 36 months in order to find a job and to find a proper situation in the host country. This is something that is quite remarkable and is quite significant. It is similar, by the way, in countries such as Canada, in which you can have a duration equivalent to that of the training received in order to look for a work position. And surprisingly enough, it is not the same in France. In 2018, in September 2018, a new act was passed, which was called Asile et Immigration, Asylum and Immigration. And in this act, the equivalent between the number of months spent for a degree and the number of months spent that you're allowed to spend in order to seek for a job or to start a new firm, for instance, a tech firm, to take one example. There's no such equivalence between the length of the degree and the length of the stay. It is limited in the act I've just referred to, it is limited to 12 months only, which seems surprisingly low compared with those other two countries from the English-speaking world, which I've been referring to. And this is just to show that the issue of inclusion at the other end of the spectrum, you know, when you come to study abroad with the aim of finding a proper situation. At the other end of the spectrum, there are still efforts to be made in order to achieve some kind of all-encompassing European situation. There are still efforts to be made in order to be able to reach the kind of consensus within Europe. And this is as much a problem of inclusion as the problem of inclusion and the problem of economic pressure on outgoing students is a problem of serious concern. So I believe that in our reflection in the years to come on how to increase student mobility and through the increase of student mobility on how to improve social inclusion, student retention, we should take into account those two aspects, the outgoing problem, but also the incoming problem, the problem of having the proper means of leaving one's institution in one's country in order to study abroad, but also the problems of finding the proper working conditions and the proper stay conditions in order for a student to achieve a proper inclusion. So we have to take both ends of the problem into account in order to achieve inclusion. So thank you for listening to me. I believe that we have time for questions, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carle Bonafous Murat. ¿Tenemos alguna pregunta en el chat online?
Bueno, antes de nada, quiero agradecer al señor Bonafous su participación con nosotros desde, digamos, esta colaboración. Todas las colaboraciones tienen mucho mérito, pero esta desde el lado francés tiene un valor especial, porque al fin y al cabo este proyecto tiene un origen que viene de Francia, el proyecto de universidades europeas, me refiero, y nos ha estado planteando una serie de cuestiones que me parecen muy importantes y que además son complementarias y que llevan a que atendamos a todos esos cuellos de botella a los que él aludía. Me gustaría plantearle, bueno, desde España vemos cómo en el marco de las universidades francesas sí que hay unos esfuerzos por ayudar, por ejemplo, desde ese punto de vista financiero, que son muy relevantes. Me gustaría que me dijese cuál es la percepción que tiene, teniendo en cuenta su posición central dentro del sistema universitario francés, respecto de la participación en estas alianzas del conjunto de universidades francesas. Quiero decir, si ha percibido que haya algún tipo de déficit geográfico, si son las grandes universidades. ¿Cuál es su percepción de la participación francesa en este proyecto de universidades europeas? Muchísimas gracias.
Yes, I've noticed a few differences between some alliances and between some French higher education institutions. For instance, as regards the issue of whether there should be special registration fees for students in European universities. This is a very important issue in France because the fees are quite low and they are established nationally on a yearly basis. And some universities say that because of mobility, the fees should be higher because mobility is more expensive, and that if you get a national degree, it's one thing. If you get a European degree, which necessitates to travel to several countries, well, then there should be an additional fee specifically for that. Whereas other universities and other French higher education institutions believe that whatever the system, whatever the combination, the fees should remain the national fees, which of course makes things difficult. And it makes things difficult even in awarding grants in order to go abroad, because some places, it's obvious, more expensive to live in some places than in others. So these are some of the discrepancies that I've been able to notice. And this is probably in keeping with the problem of fees and registration fees. But one other difference between French universities and others, which I've been able to notice, is the question of knowing whether there should be a European degree, sorry, not in the plural. That is to say, some really say that it's the main aim, that it should be today's aim for European universities, making it possible to set up a European degree which would be delivered by a European university as a whole. Others are, either not really concerned about the problem, or even feel that it would be a mistake to try and work out a degree which would be awarded by the European University as a single entity. Of course, establishing courses in common, this is not an issue, but having a common degree, which is more than a double or a triple degree, one degree for the whole European University. This is not something that all institutions in France share. This is not a name that is shared by all French institutions at the moment.
Gracias, muchísimas gracias. Aclaro en un minuto, la pregunta era porque, como hemos dicho al principio, la Alianza UNITA tiene una característica geográfica muy determinada y lo que pretende es compensar ciertas limitaciones mayores de quienes estamos en la periferia respecto de quienes están más centrados geográficamente en este proceso de construcción europea, y concretamente los dos miembros franceses de nuestra alianza, que son extraordinariamente activos, pero comparten con nosotros esos requisitos, y no es su caso, pero a lo mejor en el resto sí que tenía la curiosidad por saber si hay una cierta diferencia entre quienes están en el centro o cerca de la fronteras, digamos, centrales del proceso de construcción europea, o quienes, como nosotros, pues estamos un poco más en la periferia. Pero creo que la respuesta es muy clarificadora. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Creo que no hay más preguntas en el chat, así que vamos a pasar a la segunda sesión de la mañana.